Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you joining us from around the world. Welcome to Critical Considerations for a Post-Pandemic World. My name is Scott Rothman. I'm a director with our Effortless Experience program here at Challenger. And I'm excited to be joined today by Jon Tholen. Jon is the former head of customer service at Blue Shield of California, global customer care at Visa, and before that served as VP and in senior leadership roles at AMEX. He's known for developing teams that increase customer loyalty while at the same time driving down costs and increasing revenue. Currently, Jon runs CX Performance, where he consults with companies going through change and seeking to dramatically improve the customer experience. Jon, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you to Challenger for hosting this webinar. I'm excited for our learning experience today and our conversation. I'm also excited to see so many colleagues online and look forward to our discussion around this important topic.
Yeah, and today's discussion and conversation is focused on what we should be thinking about to accelerate out of this crisis, to put our team in a position to be successful when all this ends. Specifically, where can we not compromise? And we've got three considerations moving forward. The way this will work is similar to a sporting event. I'm going to provide the play-by-play, and then Jon's going to provide the analysis. And this is geared towards the financial services industry. And I know we've got a few other industries on the line, so I just want to set expectations up front. The takeaways are going to still be applicable, but some of the conversation is going to be a bit targeted towards the financial services space. Lastly, Jon and I want this to be interactive, so I believe at the bottom of your screen you should see a Q&A button. Just go ahead and click that, send us your question, and we'll address those during our time or during our conversation. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to start out with a quick glimpse at the current state of the current landscape. And to be blunt, it is tough sledding out there. So we've got some bad news sprinkled with some good news. And then we've got our thought leadership, those three considerations, and we'll have some good news to share there as well. We've got roughly 50 minutes allotted today. I don't see us going past that, but we've got a lot to get through. But we're going to do our best to make sure that you get on with your day. So let's just jump right into it with the current landscape. As I mentioned, it's tough sledding right now. On the left-hand side of the page, we've got job postings. In the US, as of June 5th, total job postings decreased by 9.4% compared to January 2020. Now, there's been a bit of a rebound here, right? 3 weeks ago, May 29th, total job postings had decreased by 31.7%. And now we're at 9.4%. So a nice, strong rebound. But the devil is in the details, because when you double click on these numbers, what's driving a lot of that spike are roles that require no education or minimal amounts of education. On the right-hand side, consumer spending. Again, we see a nice upward trend. In the US, as of June 3rd, total spending by all consumers decreased by 12.7%. A month ago, roughly May 10th, spending had decreased by 15.6%. And this also gets interesting if you double click, because if you segment by just, say, groceries, the chart changes considerably. If you segment by healthcare, you'll see a line that looks similar to this. If you segment by restaurants, you'll see that bottom of the chart lasts longer, and then it's rebounding, but not quite as quickly. So a few weeks ago, things were looking bleak. This week, things are looking better, at least on the surface. But when you dig deeper, it's less clear. It's clearly a fluid situation with a lot of uncertainty. In fact, it was, I think, 2 weeks ago on Friday that the jobs report was forecasted to show the highest unemployment rate since the Great Depression.
Wow.
Yeah. No surprise then that people are hurt and they're scared. On the left-hand side, we've got unemployment claims, and they are still high, over 40 million the last few months. Last week, we saw 1.5 million filed, and Jon, that's actually good news. It's a decrease. It's a decrease of 355,000 from the previous week, and it's far less than the 2.1 million a few weeks ago. Employment was actually up 2.5 million in May, but that's still down 19.6 million since February. To put this all in perspective, for those of you on the line in the States or in Europe who remember the financial crisis, take a look at the left-hand side of the page or the chart. All right, you can see a comparison of how these unemployment claims compare with the financial crisis. Over on the right-hand side, an estimated 25 to 43 million people could lose their employer-sponsored health insurance coverage. Clearly, this pertains specifically to the U.S. On top of that, more than half of the newly jobless will obtain Medicaid coverage in states that expanded Medicaid, while only about 1/3 will receive Medicaid coverage in the 15 states that haven't expanded the program. These are pretty scary times for a lot of folks.
Yes.
Yeah, no surprise then that habits have changed. They've been formed. I've already made some changes. And John, this is me, this page. It's me to a T.
I think this is all of us, Scott. This is right in the heart of it.
You know, granted, most countries, states have opened up. Most of us in the U.S. have entered at least phase 2 since this data was charted. And based on the consumer spending we saw on the previous page, we'd probably see some of these trend up, like restaurants and shopping. And I'll tell you, judging from what I see here in the DC area, people are excited to be out, but DC is a bit of a bubble. And when we take a step back, when you take a step back and look at people's finances and what may or may not happen in the next week or two or month or two, I think we need to be especially concerned if we're in the financial services space.
Absolutely.
Some sobering stats here. Left-hand side, 65% of respondents cannot meet financial obligations for longer than 6 months. 74% of millennials, 76% of Gen Xers say they don't have enough savings to last longer than 6 months. That means if I was laid off in mid-March and I haven't found another job yet, I've got just about till August before I'm in serious trouble. Not on this page. In 2018, 39% of U.S. households reported they did not have the resources to cover an unplanned $400 expense. On the right-hand side, 2016 research from McKinsey found that the average U.S. small business only had enough cash to cover 27 days of operation, not even a month. Anecdotally, judging by what I've seen with businesses in our area, businesses we know our friends work for, our own restaurants specifically, a few years ago, we're already in a precarious position. And now they're in a really tough spot. Let me share one more thing here. The U.S. paid out more in unemployment insurance benefits in the first 3 months the pandemic hit, $146 billion, than in the entire 2009 financial crisis. And a Bloomberg analysis,
Scott, in terms of that the government's just, infusing that liquidity in the market directly to the consumers. And I knew it was $600 a week, but I didn't have that idea, $146 billion.
And here's the thing, Bloomberg ran some analysis, showed that $146 billion is only about 2/3 of what's owed to the 40 million people who have lost jobs. John, what do these findings really mean for the banks, insurers, and healthcare companies on the line?
I mean, clearly it is raising red flags all over the place. I mean, consumers are getting this infusion of liquidity, yet you can see from your previous slides that it's going towards groceries. And so although we have the governments that are, asking the FIs not to foreclose, not to evict homeowners, kind of pushing that debt payment down the road, we're seeing that there's definitely a real, the data is clearly showing there's a real risk to financial institutions, insurance companies about serious loss of revenue and customers down the road the way this is progressing. Now, obviously, the government's doing a lot, as well as we see a lot of major players in industries doing a lot. I'm really impressed with some of the big players on the insurance side. I'll call out a shout out State Farm. They recently read they're giving $2 billion in insurance premium credits to their customers across the U.S. Now, we put our consumer hat on and said, well, yeah, that's only fair because, with the pandemic, we couldn't drive, we didn't have to go to work. And so there's probably, fewer claims and fewer risks out there. But even so, I think it really shows that a lot of these companies are recognizing to ante into the game, they're going to have to real customer focus, and it's going to take some impacts in their revenue and then potentially down to their customer base if they don't figure out how we're going to resolve this big wave of debt that is growing. And most companies, will do we see done. They won't waste that slogan. They'll use that slogan, we never want to waste a good crisis. And they'll take the cost-cutting measures. And we expect to see the cost-cutting measures and the belt tightening happen. Yeah, I think the real winners are going to be those companies that will invest in their employees. Yeah, they'll make investments. We know that 3/4 of investments usually go into the technology side. We'll see that the companies that come out here really winners are going to want to invest in their employees. And I think a big question is when and how do they do it? Because how long is this going to last? And when is kind of the turning point to help gauge as these investments come in? So I do think that the companies are going to want to be making those investments, but I think there's still some hesitation around when.
Yeah, and that's the $1 million question that I think we're all asking. And here's the thing: we've been running pulse surveys with customer service leaders every month since the WHO declared a pandemic. On the left-hand side, we've got the results from our first survey back in April. At that time, 74% of customer service leaders said this period of uncertainty will last about 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 months. Fast forward barely 2 months over on the right-hand side this past week, almost the same percentage now think it's going to last more than 10 months, right? Many think it's going to last at least a year. What's not on this page is when we, whoops, sorry, I'm skipping ahead accidentally. Sorry about that. Whoops. What's not on this page is when we ran our second pulse survey in May. What that survey showed was that, I'm still on the wrong page. Let's try to get on the right page. Sorry about that. Let's do this right. What our second pulse survey showed in May was that most customer service leaders thought this would last about 7 months. So in April, customer service leaders were fairly optimistic that we'd be done with this fairly quickly. A month later, not so much. And even a month later, barely a month later, they're now saying, you know what, this is probably going to last another year. Right? The environment is just so fluid. So many unknowns remain. There's plenty of volatility, but there is some good news. There's something that we all should remember. And that is that this too shall pass. Though things look bleak, we will emerge from this chaos. The headlines on the left-hand side: job losses reach worst level in 5 years, vast bailouts, right? These might look familiar, but believe it or not, these are not headlines from today, but from the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009, right? But here's the thing: while this too shall pass, it's looking a lot less and less likely that we're going to be returning to the way things were. There's going to be a new normal. John, what's the standard operating procedure during a crisis like this?
Yeah, great. Good question, Scott. I'll maybe go see
you just wrap that up for us.
Yeah, exactly. See if I can find my crystal ball and find out what the new normal is. It's clearly, this is unprecedented, the kind of situation we're in today. Now, clearly, I love the analogy you did back to the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. In that one, we could clearly see, a big buildup of the crisis happening. I was working with Visa at the time, and I remember our chief economist coming out and saying that, people are using their houses like ATMs. They're drawing down their lines of credit for just, consumer spending. And we just saw a huge, equity jump in the real estate and the consumer spending to go with it. And it was clear that, when the bubble burst, that there would be a good reckoning there. And clear enough, there had to be government bailouts. There was a lot of increased government regulations and policies and processes, and all the financial institutions had to, immediately work together and abide by it, and work with it. Yet I saw the institutions that really made the difference and came out stronger were ones that, they did the belt tightening that you have to do when you have these downturns and cycles. They, put in the compliance control pieces, but they really made an investment, with their people in terms of how do we differentiate ourselves? How do we grow our business together? How do we really look to what the consumers are going through and meet their needs? Now, that one was a little bit different than this one. Another example that comes to my mind was, early in my career, I was just a new manager on my first international assignment. So I was cutting my teeth on my first international assignment. I was over in Germany, and it was just before the first Gulf War broke out. And it was a surprise to us. Unlike the sort of the 2008, 2009, challenge there we saw kind of growing, the war was a surprise. It caught us off guard. And there was a lot of political unrest with it. I was working with an American-based company that had signage, on our office building, and I remember looking out the window on the first day and seeing thousands of protesters around our building, kind of cutting off our ability to get to work and or exit. And I was just thinking to myself, wow, what's happening here? What are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? And just like in our today's scenario, we saw, a significant change in consumer behavior, kind of what you saw there earlier, people shifting their spend from, some of the discretionary spend to basics of groceries. We saw a significant drop in our business. We had a lot more challenging in conducting ongoing businesses. We didn't have the kind of things we have now with technology. We were lucky if we had landlines and desktops at our houses. And so we saw a lot of similar type of, symptoms of what we're seeing right now in terms of challenges the businesses were facing. And for me, it was really, so yeah, we invested in technology as we could, but back then we were lucky to have an IVR, and we know how well accepted by consumers IVRs are. And so the real differentiator that brought us out was, how did we work with our employees? And we had to go through our cost cutting and belt tightening, but we made investments in employees that really, made the difference. And some of the things we're going to talk about here momentarily were key things that helped us be successful in coming out and working in what then became the new norm.
Yeah, and I think that takes us to, is a good segue to the right-hand side of this page. Quote from Jeremy Balkin, who's the head of innovation at HSBC. I think it aligns with what you've seen in your previous roles, right? The point he's making on the right-hand side, and I think he mentions a few key words. It's let's not push pause, and he doesn't even say let's double down. He's saying let's triple down. Right? This is the time that we go full steam ahead. This is the time when we should be going faster. When I think the reflex is to push pause. So let's explore this idea of what advances we can make, what decisions we should be making, what investments we can make. In other words, what are the three considerations we need to be thinking about moving forward? And so these three considerations, as you see here, are personalization, education, and resilience. Three areas where moving forward, we don't think you can compromise. These are three levers that you should start pulling yesterday, believe it or not. Across the top, we've got what you're likely thinking when I say these three things, and just below, what we think everyone needs to realize. Now, the idea of personalization might seem straightforward, but when I talk to folks in the FS industry about it, it means something different to each person I speak with. What I hear when I talk to financial services firms about personalization are things we see here. It's not scalable. It takes up too much time. We don't have the systems. I empower my reps, but I don't want them to go too far. So many of us still require reps to say a customer name 3 times or ask, is it okay if I call you John, or okay if I call you Mr. Tholen, right? We think that's personalization, but it's really not. And so what's important to realize at this point in time, especially, is, to be honest, the bar is pretty low. So let's put ourselves in our customers' shoes. Let's think like our customers do, and we can figure out how we can truly help here. Education, this one isn't as straightforward. The pushback I hear on education is a lot like, I do want to educate my customers, but I want to educate them on how to use self-service, or I don't really measure AHC, but I can't have my reps educating customers all day long, right? What we need to realize is that, one, our reps can do this, but to be blunt, customers see us as a commodity. And education, the ability to teach our customers something, is a critical step to differentiation. All right, and I'll spend just 2 seconds on AHG. John, you and I see this all the time. Leaders who say they've gotten rid of AHG, or they don't measure it on the rep scorecard. You go talk to reps, and they go, yeah, we don't really measure it, but we still measure it. Or you look at leaders' dashboards, and they go, we don't measure AHG, but when you look at the metrics they've created, AHG is baked in there. Lastly, resilience. You're probably asking yourself, how do I hire for this? How do I train staff for this? What is this? Here's the secret. Your frontline has it. We just do a good job of squashing it. We'll talk more about what it is, what we've done to squash it, how we can enable it, and why it's so important. And we'll get into details on the next few pages. Last thing I'll call out, the bottom of the page, the first 2 levers and the first 2 considerations, these are things your reps can do tomorrow. The third lever, or the third consideration, this is something that you as a leader need to truly think about and can enable. Let's start with the first consideration, personalization. Again, what we're talking about here is what are the things that we can do for our customers to make this feel like we are caring about them. Again, let's put ourselves in their shoes. I'll walk you through some statistics here. On the left-hand side, low effort reps ask customers questions 320% more frequently than high effort reps. So that's one of the first things we can do. Hey, ask customers some questions. Over on the right-hand side, this notion of advocacy. Hey, let's advocate for our customers, but in order to do so, let's figure out something about them. Let's figure out what we need to advocate for. We know from the research that advocacy has a tremendous positive impact on the quality of the experience as well as the level of effort. And John, we talked about this, but most personalization in our industry, when does it happen? On the sales side, right? There's some interesting research from BCG where they found that a majority of people who are either open to or are actively mulling changing banks would consider banking with a tech company, Amazon, Facebook, or Google, or something like that, if they could. Now, that's not me. I would never do it because I don't feel like giving them any more information than they have. But it's an interesting or telling stat, the fact that people are willing to share all this information, so in return, they get a more personalized experience. And building on that, I want to highlight an article in Forbes the other day. Shep Hyken, who many on the line will know as a CX thought leader, quoted a survey from CGS twice. In the survey, they found that 38% of US respondents and 39% in the UK stated that having the opportunity to speak to a live agent is make or break in this environment. Further, more than 25% of respondents were disappointed by a brand for not having a human-to-human option available. And then the second finding that he highlighted was that in stressful times, such as right now, or frankly, almost any time when you're a rep, more than half of the US customers surveyed wanted phone or voice options.
Absolutely, Scott. I think you're spot on with your research and quotes there. I mean, we're just seeing that the human piece, the rep, is not going away, and neither are challenging calls. As a matter of fact, I think we're seeing, even a greater need for this and a greater need for this personalization. I love, these companies have done a great job like Amazon that have standardized and have created some great processes that would, when working well, you don't need to speak to a person, you don't need to speak to customer care, process works. But we're just seeing, I think, greater and greater, as we see the volatility and challenges in our economy, greater and greater meltdown of that. And when you do need that help and it's hard to get, it is going to tarnish and it is going to take away customers, it's going to change customers' choices from, as you mentioned, from what financial institution they go with to, where they might consider other outside players coming into the industry. For me, I saw this personalization critical, both throughout my entire career. One of the key, I guess, examples comes to mind when I was working in Australia at the time. And we were looking at this personalization process and thinking about how do we really leverage it to help us. I was working with a card company where, in card companies, we know that most consumers out there, they have, 3 or 4 card products in their wallet. And our goal is to get our card top of the wallet. How do we make sure our card's top of the wallet? How do we make sure the spend happens on our product? And we were looking at our customer journeys, interactions, and how we personalize it. And one of the steps we found was a very simple step called card activation. Now, most FIs know what that is. That's, customer calls in, they receive the card, they call in to activate the card. Most organizations would have that caller go right into a voice response unit or do it online now on the web. No human interaction, strictly a transaction. But we wanted to test if this might be an opportunity for personalization. So rather than having that caller go directly into a voice response unit, we had them come to a live rep. And the live rep would go ahead and do the activation process. And during the course of that conversation, they would congratulate the customer for selecting our product and being approved. And during the course of that conversation, ask a question like outlined here on the slide. Ask a question about how they plan to use the product to enable them to help them bring to bear the most important features that will benefit the customer. And so it led into a great dialogue where our representatives were able to discuss the features, whether the person was getting the card for travel or getting it for small business inventory products, or a number of different reasons why they'd get the product. That we had great features that would really endear this product to the customer, and the customer would want to choose this customer over other products they might have in their wallet. As we did this, we saw the same kind of statistics you can see here on the slide: significant lift in customer spend on our product, significant loyalty, retention. We could see it clearly, the card move up in the wallet from just being in the wallet to top place in the wallet. And it was really, the key variable we saw was this personalization of this discussion during this point in their customer journey with us. How important this is, it's important we overstate it versus overlooking it. And it happens, you want to make it important across all your omni-channel customer care touch points, but certainly some of the biggest impact is with your customer care representatives.
It's interesting, as you're speaking, it's interesting. I mean, in times of crises, customers' priorities just all of a sudden change, and we have an opportunity to play a significant role in helping with that and easing a lot of that. And as you were talking, it just highlights the low effort skills that we teach that are just below. Things like flexing communication skills, the ability to recognize my own communication style, as well as the communication style of my customer and who I'm speaking with, and tailor, who I'm speaking with and tailor that accordingly. The ability to own your issue and advocate on your behalf from start to finish. We talked a lot about asking customers questions. That's what surfacing additional information is, asking smart, pointed questions. And then last but not least, something that resonates strongly with me right now is acknowledging baggage, recognizing that customers have some past, something going on in their life that they're bringing to this call with us. And we have an opportunity to acknowledge that. It's imperative that we acknowledge that baggage.
I think our old research showed that 58% of the customer's feeling about this call happens even before they get here.
Yeah. And
that was the pre-pandemic. I'm sure it's even a higher statistic now.
Yeah. So that's personalization. We can probably talk about this for some time, but let's skip to education. Again, when we're talking about education, it's this ability for our reps to teach our customers something, right? And so I'll walk you through the stats here again. Left-hand side, low effort reps spend 5% more time with customers than high effort reps. Why? Because customers are willing to spend time with reps who know what they're talking about, who can actually help them. What does that look like? Well, take a look at the right-hand side. Low effort reps offer customers guidance 740% more frequently than high effort reps. So in other words, if you can guide me to the right alternative, if you can guide me to the right solution, if you can ask the right questions, if you can teach me something, I'm willing to spend more time with you because I know you can help. And one of the best examples I have is of my dad, John, 80 years old, about 3 or 4 years ago, or I should say can take a picture and do the mobile check submit and deposit. Why? Because 3 or 4 years ago, when he was talking to his bank, the rep took 5 minutes, well, probably longer, but 5 minutes to teach my dad how to do that. And while in the short term, it might not have been a huge win for the rep, in the long term, it's a huge win because now it's easier for my dad and of course, easier on the bank. I mean, here's the thing. We operate in a complex industry, complex products, regulation upon regulation. We talked about small businesses earlier. Imagine you're a small business owner navigating this chaos. Imagine you're a restaurant owner. You've got to deal with your banking and insurance needs at the restaurant level on top of your personal banking and insurance needs. And oh, by the way, you got to figure out in 27 days before you run out of money. John,
exactly.
How does education help us as a financial services institution come out stronger than before?
Well, Scott, as I look at customer service, I think it's typically you think about education, quite often it goes from the selling perspective. And I think selling and customer service go really hand in glove. When you think about selling, it's about bringing solutions to customer issues. And that's what customer service is about as well, bringing solutions to customer service issues. How can you do that if you're not able to bring to bear what the real solutions are? So often customers call us with a specific problem. For example, in your dad's case, he was probably calling because he was worried about checks bouncing or about going into overdraft. So the issue was, how do I stop that? But the representative thought about, yeah, I can put an overdraft on your account and protect it so you don't have any bounce checks. But let's get to the root of the issue. What's the challenge? Well, getting that check deposit is a real issue. And so being able to educate and bring solutions in that your dad probably didn't even know about was critical. I found the same thing in the work that I've been doing recently with a number of different companies, whether it be utility companies or insurance companies, where customers are calling in, and especially now where, hey, I need to stop my auto draft. I'm concerned about bouncing checks. I don't have the funds anymore. COVID-19 has dramatically impacted my income. And so they're wanting to stop the overdraft or stop the auto draft. Now, our customer service representative say, great, I'll go ahead and stop that for you. You could have done that in the IVR. You could have done that online. I could tell you about those things, but telling the customer how to do things online is not educating.
Yeah.
Educating is bringing out what it is that we could do to help them with their perhaps unstated issues. And so in this case, not being able to pay their monthly utility bill or their insurance premium, that's the kind of issue they're trying to solve for. But guess what? They stopped the auto draft, but they still didn't pay their premium. So now their insurance is going to cancel, or your utilities are going to be canceled. Or in the case of the financial institutions, they're going to get interest payments and late fees for not making a payment. So we didn't really solve the problem. There might have been, for example, a utilities company educating the customer about, what are the government opportunities there that might be able to help pay for their utilities? Or is it a short-term income loss, and could a payment plan be of service to them, helping them, really meet with their longer-term needs, which is, how do I stay whole in this? How do I get my needs met? And customers don't know what they don't know. And that's where the value of this representative really comes into play. And it's important that they get that extra 5%. What a big difference it can make in retaining your customers and stopping those future callbacks and really delivering the kind of business outcome that's going to take you through these volatile times.
Yeah, it's something that sticks with me that I had a head of operations at a bank in Australia tell me once, is that he said to me, customers often know something's wrong or something's not working, but they often don't know what's possible. I think that's something that, again, sticks with me when I think about this education piece. We have an invaluable opportunity to make an impact here. And again, the things that you're describing to me are those effortless skills at the bottom of the page, the ability, again, to ask pointed, smart questions, the ability to recognize that you are bringing baggage to the table, the ability to position a better alternative. I know you are stressed out and you're wondering about your payment. Here are some alternatives we have. Here are things that we can do. And then, of course, things like, not only are we going to solve this problem, we're going to solve the next likely problem as well. So you don't have to worry about this moving forward. In other words, that next issue avoidance. So when we take a step back here, right, we've talked about personalization and education. These are the two things that our reps can start doing tomorrow. Let's spend a few minutes talking about that resilience piece, because that one speaks directly to the leaders we have on the line here. And many people are probably wondering what that is. I think most of us on the line are familiar with IQ as well as EQ, but this is something called CQ, or control quotient. But the easiest way to think about CQ is this idea of resiliency. And this is important because turns out CQ matters more than IQ and EQ. So we'll walk through again why this matters, but here's the key. The first couple, IQ and EQ vary by individual. CQ varies by company. If I kind of take a step back and simplify this a bit, and what does CQ look like? It's when you let things roll off your chest. If you're a rep, you can be on a rough call, get off that rough call, get on to the next one without letting that previous call impact the current call. And it turns out what we've learned from the research is that most reps have a moderate to high level of CQ. It's not a rep issue, it's a leadership issue. We as leaders have done a fantastic job at squashing the reps' CQ by the way we manage our organization, whether that's through outdated QA checklists, whether it's not aligning our goals or their goals with ours, if it's somehow isolating reps. I mean, there's just a number of things that we've done. And so we want to spend time talking about the way we can enable CQ, and it's by demonstrating these three things on the page. Demonstrating trust in reps, aligning reps to organization goals, and then strengthening peer support networks. And the key here, John, I know you're going to talk us through this, but we need to give our reps the right skills, but we also have to give them the right environment around them.
Thanks, Scott. And I definitely love this consideration. This is one that's near and dear to my heart. I'd even, in my own layman's term, kind of relabel this from resiliency to champion, that we want to make sure that so often as I go into customer care organizations, I see representatives that feel like they have that victim mentality. Like there's things out outside of the company's control that are negatively impacting my job, or company policies and procedures that are stopping me from really being able to do what I'd like to do. And so we just have that kind of victim mentality. What's stopping us from delivering the kind of customer experience our customers would want. And this CQ is really about helping the employees develop that ownership, that control quotient is really around empowering them to be able to deliver the kind of customer experience that we feel like the customer should receive. And I can't highlight enough here how important the leadership piece is to make this happen. I love that first comment, my company trusts me to do what is right. We say company, but people are really talking about their leader. Leadership is where this really makes a big difference for us. And I found that as far as the leadership goes, that the leaders need to really make sure they're taking on that kind of coach mindset. So often we see, I don't mean to be disparaging towards police officers, but we see what I call a cop mindset. As a leader, you've got to decide, am I going to be the coach or the cop? How do I really build a relationship that's going to enable me to help this employee feel like they can do the best work of their career, that they know that I'm in their corner, and the entire organization is in their corner to help them be successful. And the representatives get that, and they feel that trust. We know that as they feel the trust, they know that people in their corner, they're willing to take risks. They're willing to go that extra mile, ask that question, develop the judgment that's going to be required to enable them to personalize a call or to provide the right kind of information to the customer at the right time. It takes a lot of relationship piece, and here I put in one of the key things is making sure that as leaders that we truly do put on that coach hat. They do know that we're there to help them do the best work of their career. We can help them self-discover versus tell them what's wrong or what's right, but help them continue down the learning journey, which really goes into these next two key columns here. The goal organization, making sure the goals are aligned, that we've put the right infrastructure in place, that employees are rewarded and recognized as the company grows and is recognized and successful. That we talk about not just what we want to accomplish, but how important that is, that we want to get there the right way that's not going to create a lot of collateral damage. And that as I come in every day, I can clearly see how I'm doing. It's so important that we have the right infrastructure in place. And employees, when they come to work and they finish the day, they don't need their supervisor, their boss to walk up to them and tell them, you did a good job. They can tell, they know based on their goals and the information they're seeing that they're doing a great job. Or here are some areas I need to work on. And that's where I can go and talk to my boss, or to this third column we're going to talk about, that great companies that really work to develop the CQ culture, they make sure the learning doesn't just happen, from a supervisor representative, that learning happens laterally. They invest in this, peer support network where it's okay not to know something. It's okay to ask a question. And it's really okay to give, to be able to share your knowledge, to be able to help people grow within your organization. I've seen a lot of organizations do a great job with these peer support networks that really changes the core of the culture, that the learning really happens, the sharing really happens. It becomes this kind of giving culture. And you think about it, I know there's a lot of organizational psychologists out there that say, man, with all this stress going on, what's the best defense against all the stress from the chaos and volatility? And they come back and say giving. If you can give, if you can help other people during this time, it brings peace to you, and it creates your resiliency. It creates your ability to work through these challenges even more. And that's so important in this CQ culture, that you have people that are willing to give, and that the infrastructure is put in place to make that really possible. Again, all three of these lean heavily on leadership. It's all about the leadership wanting to design this culture. And this culture works regardless whether you're in brick and mortar, whether you're all together shoulder to shoulder, or whether you're working from home. That how you set this up is critical. Making sure that there's not an us versus them. I've seen many organizations that basically don't have QA or customer experience separate departments. Rather, it's all part of the operations, and that the employees are able to hear firsthand how the customers have received them, how that customer experience is going, and be able to develop their own action plans, as well as everyone takes ownership for compliance. We don't throw it out the window, but rather we all take ownership for it. It's not a person back there with a checklist saying, did you say the customer's name 3 times, or did you, ID them before you gave out personal identifying information, but rather we all know that's the goal, and we all are listening for it, and we're all going to make sure it happens. So these, again, Scott, again, I can't overstate them enough. Hopefully nobody overlooks them.
Yeah. And again, I think the important piece here is it bears repeating, and I don't mean to make jokes, but these are things that our reps are open to, they do, but we as a leadership team or as a group have done a really good job of kind of just pushing that down, squashing that. So it's not necessarily hey, look, how do I teach my staff this? It's just, let's enable it a bit more. And I think there are two things that I think about or thought about as you were speaking. One was a granular example and one was a bit higher level or maybe an analogy of sorts. But if we were to take a look at frontline staff at a low CQ environment or low CQ company and ask them, what do you like about your job as a rep? The responses that you get, John, are things like, well, I like the hours I work, not having to work on the weekends, or I like the money, or I like working with customers. Compare that with the responses you would get at a high CQ company. Those responses look like, I appreciate that my team trusts that I can do this job on my own. I enjoy having some freedom in this role. I enjoy the environment, right? Those are considerably different questions, or I should say different answers to the same questions. And I guess maybe in an effort to help, if we put it into context in another way, where you see a lot of CQ or high CQ is in the nursing profession, in the medical field. And if you think about it, if you are a nurse, you're in one room for however long dealing maybe with an unruly patient, an unhappy patient, a patient that just got some bad news, a patient that is on high doses of medicine, and this sort of a trying environment. That nurse has to go from that room to the next room and immediately brush off that previous room. It cannot impact that next room that they walk into. And that's sort of the idea. I mentioned this earlier, not to equate, say, our world with the nursing world per se, but the idea is that as a rep, I need to be able to move from maybe a tough call, a bad call, a tough customer, and just let that roll off my chest and move on to the next. Okay, we've got a few minutes left. I want to spend some time wrapping up here with some key takeaways, and then John and I will stick around a little bit longer for any additional Q&A. 3 key takeaways to go along with these 3 considerations, if you will. The first one, this will pass. However, there is most likely a new normal that is coming. And it's going to be filled most likely with ongoing change, changing customer behaviors, and all that stuff, if you will, is going to require greater flexibility, greater agility, greater creativity on our part. The second key takeaway, I got this quote from you, John. Adversity does not build character, it reveals it. Adversity brings opportunity. The reflex, again, is to push pause, but leaders make bold decisions during uncertain times. 3, separate yourself from the rest of the pack. Double down on personalization, education, and resilience. John, I want to thank you for joining us and bringing your perspective. I want to thank everyone on the line. Appreciate your thoughts, appreciate your questions. We're happy to stick around for a little bit longer if there are any additional questions. But I, again, mentioned very early on, want to make sure we get everyone on with the rest of their day. So thank you so much for joining us. Again, stick around for additional Q&A. But otherwise, we hope to talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.